You're listening to the MLS Fantasy Insider, bringing you weekly tips, tricks, and advice for the official MLS fantasy game.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MLS Fantasy Insider. I am working on getting the social media updates out right now. So out there on Twitter X and out there on Blue Sky. So if you would be so kind, please do hit the retweet button for that or whatever it is called on Blue Sky. And then getting information out there on Discord right now. Got everything out there. So yeah, please do like and retweet all of that. For those of you joining us for the first time here on YouTube, I know I saw a few people interacting for the first time plugging the podcast today. Welcome. We are live with you pretty much every Monday as long as schedules and life allow that to happen. But we're here on Monday giving you sort of the early insights into takeaways and initial player targets that we have going into the next MLS fantasy round. So very much happy to have you join us. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe, hit the bell notification button. It helps so much here on YouTube to get this content spread out amongst the world and just fellow like-minded fans. And particularly take an eye on the new video captain's picks shorts that we have coming out. Ashley and I have each done one so far this year. Kind of fun. New little format. Let us know what you think about that. So definitely something new, but fun to do. So let's see here. Checking over here.
And my captain picks were terrible.
It's fine. It was a weird one. We'll definitely
it
get
felt
to that.
Good. Gold, Ojeda, Messi. Those are some locked picks.
Yeah, we can see what happens. All right, so we're going out there. People are joining. Thanks so much, everybody. We will get everything started right now. Hello and welcome to the MLS Fantasy Insider, our preview of Round 3 of the 2025 MLS Fantasy season. This episode is brought to you by Hate Has No Place on Our Pitch. Yes, and also brought to you by the amazing MLS Fantasy Insider patrons. It's because of you that we are able to keep this project going. Find out more about our Patreon project over at patreon.com/MLSFI. And just so happy for everyone who continues to be a supporter of the podcast and the initiatives. I'm your host, Reid Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com. And tonight I'm joined by my partner in fantasy, Ashley Savage. We'd also like to welcome our very special guest, Matt Pollard, managing editor of Burgundy Wave and award-winning beat writer for the Colorado Rapids. How you all doing?
Good. How are you, Reid?
I'm doing well. I have been waiting for months to say that for the first time, and I'm so glad that Wojo was able to help get you on earlier in the show rather than later.
Yes, happy to be here on your Reid. I will say, listeners, normally we're coming towards the end of the season. Normally I'm on right at the end, so then there's nothing left new to talk about. I will say, though, Reid, you had me on a little bit too early because as someone who is very much team budget where I want to build my team, I don't care about the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. I had to, for the rundown for this show, I had to check to see what I did in head-to-head because normally I'm focused on just building my budget and everything. So, Reid, let's pencil me in for my appearance in 2025. Let's go late April, early May. At that point, I'll have had my budget. I'll be building up. My team will be good, and I'll have actually won some head-to-head games in our Experts League.
No, what we're going to have to do is we'll just re-coordinate. I mean, we'll do that for next year, but re-coordinate this year to have you back later in the show to coordinate with a brag round. We were like, see, this is what it was. This was what that slow start was, and now it's come to fruition. So
I'll bump someone, Matt. You know,
that's what we'll do. Yeah, we'll just make it work.
We'll just bump them.
We'll just find one of Christian's times and say, be like, no, sorry, man, you got to wait next time. Well, I definitely want to talk to you a little bit like we've done with every guest so far this year, just a little bit of strategy about your approach. But first, I want to make a quick shout out to Romanano Farfar, whatever. I'm so sorry I butchered your name. Romanofafar. We'll go with that, FC. Regardless of how I say your team name or how I butchered your team name, you are this week's overall #1 player, fantasy team. And from what I understand, we have I don't know if it's a partner, but we have a friend podcast from one of the host of this podcast. Name is Pascal. He plays in our MLS Fantasy Insider Invitational League. It is a French-speaking MLS fantasy podcast. We got connected last year. Super fun. It's called MLS Fantasy Hebdo, and this Roman, we'll just go with that. Roman is one of their players, and so I wanted to give a shout out to sort of a co-podcast friend of the show, and big congrats there for coming in #1 this week.
Nice.
But let's talk Matt real quick. So Matt, for those of you who aren't familiar with you and your work, just give us a quick blip about you and about your fantasy experience.
Yeah, I live in Denver, Colorado. I've been covering the Colorado Rapids since 2016. At the start of 2023, I got the esteemed honor of taking over and revamping Burgundy Wave. You all know what happened to SB Nation after that, so we've been independent. It'll be a year next month, actually. That's been going really, really well. We've had a good response from the Rapids community, so we're covering mostly the Rapids, but also some general Colorado soccer. We're going to need another beat writer for this, but we will be covering the Denver NWSL team when they come in, and we just entered into year 8 for Holding the High Line with Rabbi and Red. I would argue the premier Colorado Rapids podcast over there with myself and Rabbi Mark Goodman. I got more interested in MLS fantasy. This would have been back 2013. I think for the first time, I, as a semi-broke college student, had enough money to afford MLS Live. So then I was watching all of the games, and I wanted an easier way of getting familiar with the rest of the league. I had good experience with hockey and then professional football, and having fantasy being a conduit for that, and basically caught the bug. And now I'm just a sicko like you and Ashley, and I live in the Discord, at 4:35, 4:45 when the lineups are putting out. And then I set my Eastern Conference lineup, and then I go to the tailgate, and then I go watch the Rapids get a psychotic 3-3 draw with Lucho Acosta and FC Dallas.
There we go. That's the way to be. Absolutely. So you mentioned this before the show started, and I quickly added it to the rundown just to get your thoughts. For people who haven't been playing very long, there's been a slight tweak, like one of the few changes that happened this year, to sort of how initial player prices started and a little bit to how the player price changes are going. In the past, it's been more like whole numbers. Now we're getting in like 250. People came in at like 3.8 instead of these more kind of rounded numbers we might have been used to seeing as they've gone. And you mentioned you were interested about how people, what they thought of this new approach to setting prices and price changes in some of these different little increments that we've seen before. And I'm just going to throw that question right back at you for you to answer.
So, Reid, I liked in the past form of MLS Fantasy about how there was a set of how much an individual player could increase in price, and in particular, it was incremental. So, everybody either started off at a whole $1 million valuation or at a $500,000, but then people would move 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, or 0.4, 0.2, 0.3. And I think that pricing stayed the same last year, Reid, but I would argue there was an over-index or there was too much volatility in the price value swings, particularly early on in the season. I think they've done a better job of how much players are increasing and decreasing, but they're also not in equal increments as well. Like they're going up to 0.2 or 0.3. Like I would rather have it be incremental numbers just because I think somewhere in there, somebody's getting rounded up or rounded down. And I as a math quantitative person who does not have multiple Google Docs spreadsheets with my MLS fantasy team planning things out, would like a little bit more stability in that. And I say that as I'm doing multiple windows on my screen here, and I actually look at I'd say the narrow, not the formation version of your team points as well. And it's actually showing player valuations with 2 zeros. Right now I'm looking at Christian Kalina, 7.00 million, which would imply in the league that at some point he can be 7.01 or 6.99, which does not exist. So just a minor gripe there. And I will say this, Reid, this is for most of the people listening to this podcast, this is a short-term problem that shouldn't affect you after round 10, because eventually we all just do such a good job of increasing your player value to the point where then budget's no option, or if it is, it's because you've got everybody is over 10 million in value. So this is a minor, for someone who prioritizes this early on in the MLS fantasy season, this is a minor inconvenience for me. Yes, I'm paying attention to the nitpicky details. I will not stop.
Yeah, and that's a great lead into a main theme of the show tonight. Is we're going to be talking a lot about value building, because if you're new, it is such a crucial early part of the season, and not just early part of the season, but early part of when you start playing the game. And so that'll be a thing that people will pick up tonight. Before we get into our round recap, just one last question. Can you tell us what your general approach is to fantasy or your general strategy?
I will say this amended read after you'll remember I had you on holding the high line this time last year to help me after I had my worst start to MLS fantasy ever. I was normally king of the auto ruse. I would have 3 semi scrub or reach guys on the bench, and then I would have 2 guys who were not starting at all. And then I would pick, auto ruse would give me 2 of the best 3. I've now downgraded that down to just 1 and going for 3. I am still team have in the earlier time slots, have a goalkeeper on the bench to set up a keeperoo. Ashley, we were just talking before we hit the record button about how we both probably over the course of our entire MLS fantasy career have had Stefan Fry on our team more than any other MLS goalkeeper. And I would say also, Reid, I'm tending more towards more strikers, at least early on, or I think there's early on in the season when you're either looking for points or looking for value. I think there's more there's more sure things in terms of you've got a striker who, if their team is going to score, it's going to be them, maybe then some of the more fringe midfielders who have a floor of 2, but then maybe a ceiling of 7. And I'll point out, Reid, I was definitely I was a non-believer in Christian Benteke last year, and you would have had I would have had you on, and you would have said go with Benteke, and I believe I started him. I don't think I captained him, and he scored. So I've had Benteke, and he's gotten me 15, 16 points so far in the first 2 weeks. So that's really good. Where normally I was also king of the 3-5-2. So that's something that I'm looking at. But I've got one other thought on defenders, but we'll get to that when we go through our picks for round 3.
Recording in progress.
Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
Who dropped the ball? Gene?
No, it's totally me. No, we'll definitely get to that, and I can easily get the early audio edited. Not a problem.
Okay.
No, it's all
This
good.
is a professional situation.
Well, no, it is what it is. This is what people come for. No, I look forward to hearing the defender take, and yeah, like I said a second ago, building value so important to find that balance throughout the season, and so a lot of what goes into building the value is being able to dissect some of those important takeaways from the previous round to identify those players who are going to be trending up. And let's just focus on that now with doing our recap of round 2. Ashley, how did you do?
Yeah, I've had a slow start, slower than the last couple seasons, and I'm okay. Thank you for checking in. I had a 71, which I don't think is terrible, but God, I had the worst midfield. I lost half my head-to-heads. That's not true. The only head-to-heads I lost were to Black and Red and Christian, who are folks that I don't love losing to. And I won the rest of mine. But I have 106.8 in the bank. I think that's doing okay. I had some price rises on players who didn't play well for exactly what you were just talking about, Reid, which was they played well the round before and they did well enough that I still got a price rise out of them. So that was helpful. My midfield was atrocious. I had 2s and 3s except for Ojeda. So that was cool. Diego Rossi, who was like my one real gut pick, like no matter what anybody said to me going into last week, I was like, no, I just really feel good about it. I want to keep him even on the road. He got minutes played, so that was just not my favorite. I also, on the other side, was very coy about Yeboah. I wasn't really I didn't believe it. I was kind of just into it because everyone else was into it. Everyone I talked to had all these reasons. Christian, I feel obligated there. And he did produce, so I feel like that warrants a call out with the 11. I consider that producing. But yeah, I had to use 2 scrubs like we've talked about before. I try not to scrub, but if my bench hits, I'm gonna scrub in. So
Yeah.
I'd use 2 scrubs this week, which is against what I prefer to do, but like we said, points. So something that I had some takeaways from this round was the Jim Curtin era has a lot of goals to it. Post Jim Curtin era, sorry, not the Jim Curtin era was a pretty consistent 2-goal maybe. Afterwards, the Philly is just, I mean, they're not keeping clean sheets, but they're scoring goals. And so that's definitely something I want to pay attention to. There's a lot of times in previous seasons where we looked at Gazdag as very goal contribution reliant. I don't think many fantasy play, and I'm sure there's people out there who did, but in the circle of people I talked to, we were not taking the strikers seriously. maybe we should. They are looking. FC Cincinnati is a good team. I know there's some injuries and holes, but to play them the way that they did was really impressive to me. Columbus defense, they were last season as well, but they're continuing to look really solid. That's something to definitely continue to keep an eye on, pay attention to. Miami don't need Messi, I guess. This is a kind of a fantasy trap we all fell into at different points last year, and I tried to talk myself into holding space, as the youth say now, for Luis Suarez. I didn't, and I'm regretful. So I think it's very interesting. Houston is a okay team, newer defense, new goalkeeper, but Miami really came in there with a lot of, new names, not all the big players, and they really put on a show. So I think it's worth mentioning that not completely ignoring Miami if Messi's not there might be a good idea. There are other fantasy contributors on that team, clearly. And then I don't want to pull from Reid, but Evander scored. It happened. We were waiting for it.
Pity goal.
I know. But there's been a lot of talk about how he's going to produce in league and how he's going to produce in fantasy, and round 1 was not his round. So it was nice to see him get on the score sheet, at least as he works into minutes and form with the team. So yeah.
Matt.
So as I mentioned earlier, I get off to a little bit of a slow start every year in MLS Fantasy. I got 51 points. Reid, I would like to officially complain and demand that Don Garber immediately have another expansion team next year, because I was so used to having $4 million scrubs that weren't starting because there were 29 teams in MLS. So somebody always wasn't playing on the weekend, and me accidentally setting and forgetting and realizing that there's a random $4 million scrub on Vancouver who gets subbed in with 2 minutes left to go. So that happened to me. I did get bit by I was convinced that Colorado Rapids were going to have a bounce back performance and things were looking great. Cheeto was performing great. They give up 2 goals, and then Cheeto gets subbed out and only gets 1 point after a yellow card. Ashley, I'll agree with you that no Messi, no problem is a sometimes thing or something we need to consider with inner Miami. Reid, we are normally proponents of you stack players against the San Jose Earthquakes because they are bad and they are chaos, and occasionally they will randomly beat the Seattle Sounders or Portland Timbers 2 or 3-0. But on the whole, if you've got 2 attackers against San Jose, you're going to be okay. And now I might be caring about the San Jose Earthquakes from a fantasy standpoint because they might be very, very good in MLS Fantasy. This is a new phenomenon that I'm not necessarily familiar with. On the other side of California, I do think that the LA Galaxy are in trouble with their injuries, and clearly not having Ricky Puig and selling Dejan for straight cash homie to Sporting Kansas City is a problem. I think we're approaching kind of similar to when Minnesota would struggle, even when they had Emmanuel Reynoso, where Gabriel Peck is going to get his. I do think Diego Fagundes is going to be a good budget option as a 3rd or a 4th midfielder. I am staying away from the rest of the LA Galaxy, and like I did with having Ryan Gauld on my team and having to captain him because Messi was out, I increasingly will be looking at players who are playing against the LA Galaxy rather than for the LA Galaxy. And Reid, I'll throw this to you, kind of a question that I have as well. We don't have obviously Kai Wagner is playing really, really well to start the season, and then we've seen that Brooks Lennon hasn't been playing well as well. There hasn't been, or I'm waiting to see if there's another like lock starter defender like we've had in the past as well. And I'm wondering if early on we should either be going for budget options, we should be clean sheet hunting, and then just having Kai Wagner. There was a simplicity with the way that MLS Fantasy was in the past of it was Brooks Lennon, Kai Wagner, and then who else are you going with? Maybe it was Maluda last year for Charlotte down the stretch when they were getting clean sheets. I don't know that there's a whole lot of certainty, so I'm going to generally go towards teams I like in a clean sheet that are playing at home. I think that's kind of a safe bet, but that kind of takes the fun out of the individual player. Atlanta, if you want to get Brooks Lennon into the starting lineup so that he and Miguel Almiron can have some fun, my fantasy team would appreciate it. Oh,
he's hurt, right?
Is he hurt?
I think he's hurt.
Lennon's coming back.
He's coming back, but I thought it was that shoulder surgery or whatever that was, and he still just wasn't fit from that. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone will tell us. I thought he was hurt.
I thought so too.
Yeah. But I hear you.
It's all good. I mean, I can answer your question. So, well, it's that is absolutely something I looked at in one of the first drafts of my team, was just being like, Baribo, Gazdag, Wagner, let's go, and let's see from there. You can absolutely do that. Looking at some of the fantastic scores that we've seen with chat, which, by the way, quick pause, big shout out to Team Daniel Edelman Glazer. That is longtime show supporter Sherry's son, who is killing it. 3rd overall in the game right now. So absolutely amazing. Well done right there. 98 points this past round. It is, depending on your budget, I know people are saying they've got 107, they've got 106. I'm like 105.1. And so that's probably average, okay-ish for where you're at right now. Rolling with Wagner, Gazdag, Baribo, it can potentially really make your team thin, where you might be having to look at 1 or 2 4.0 scrub players. And so at this point in the season, I feel that value building is so important that you probably still start to lean towards building some of that value to be able to load up that line, because that was absolutely, I of course watched that game. There was just so much opportunity, so much generation from those players. I would lean Gazdag just because you can have some really good defensive value right now that are still going to have the point rises, and that tends to be where I like to put my money. But I feel like it would be tough to squeeze all those guys and then just build them around. But at the beginning of this point of the season, if we were looking for some of that traditional couple of guys and maybe get another one, I'd say Wagner is right there of someone you'd be looking at. Like, this is almost going to be in my team every time. A couple of good rounds from the Geary as well have done well. I think that number 2 spot's still up in the air with some of the form that's coming on there. I think potentially looking at some of the Charlotte guys could be an option if you're looking for some clean sheet hunting that's going on. Clean sheet hunting should always be a bonus. I think the wingbacks have been showing their value in this new evolution of fantasy, with the ability to get those key passes, get those crosses, be dangerous for assist, potentially a goal, especially the ones who are on set plays. Some big CBs can really help right now, but it tends to mostly be, I think, a wingback dominated game, and we're almost at the point where you could probably go with give me a Wagner, but he's still building value. The rest of the takeaways I have, like, I got 72 points, won all of my head-to-heads. The very rare I gained a point after the point corrections during this week, which, as we said last week, points did update on Monday. This is what you should expect going forward as what the typical cadence is going to be. I increased my budget by 4.1, though. I did not have a great round 1 with budget gain, and so I was really working on a shoestring. So got 4.1 million more in my budget after this round 2. So that's given me more breathing room to work with. I suffered from, I know last couple of weeks we've talked about some people just like take their first gut instinct and go. I like to think a bit more about my picks. And so when we got that news about Messi's not going to be here, what are you going to do? I'm going to scratch this guy. Okay, that gave me some more room, money. I can maybe update. Like, that was far too quick for me to really have time to kind of sit down and think through my plan, plus being out running errands with the family on the phone, like, there we go. And so as I sat down, I was like, man, I really, like, why wouldn't I have just gone, I'm going to go with Suarez. He's performed well in the past. It doesn't matter. I'm going to wait and see what happens on Sunday. But then I ended up going with Ojeda. Didn't work well. I mean, he did okay. He was my number 2 backup captain anyway. And so that's just probably what I would have looked at. But I like a little bit more time to digest. I'm not a big just spur of the moment kind of gut decision guy. And so that can be rough, but it's just something that definitely happens with the game. And it's why we do always have at the end of the segment, if not Messi, who? That's why you have the captains, because these are the things. This is pure 100% hashtag because MLS. This is what we have right here. Be on the lookout this week, probably tomorrow, Tuesday, for our strategy article, which is a new series that is going to focus on value building, because it is important. Even if this is the first team you're building, if you miss the first 2 rounds, you can still focus on value building. There's not that much difference between the 100 million teams and 105 million teams. You can still get key players. It might take you a little bit longer to build up to that value threshold, but you'll get there. You'll be able to afford players. You can focus on Champions League qualifier 2, 3, and 4 to get into that Champions League qualifier round at the end of the season. So there is still, it is not like you're done with the game if you didn't start with round 1. You absolutely can join in, and we'll see about giving you some advice later in the week on MLSFantasyBoss.com. Just some quick takeaways that I have. There are definitely some keepers who are going to rise regardless of what they did. I wouldn't even be surprised to see if Pantemis is on that list. CJ Joe Santos, Lori's probably going to get some. There may be a few others, but just pay attention to those last couple of rounds and just see where the keepers are looking. Pretty much anyone that's in that 800 million plus over the last 2 weeks, as you can see a track on the player of how much did they change last week, how much have they changed overall in the year. So we're looking at the last 2 rounds. Someone 800,000 plus, probably very likely to get a decent increase the next round regardless. 500 or less, bit more iffy of what you might see. You might get a smaller increase, but look at that year-to-date change right now. Still going to be helpful for you right there. Speaking of some defenders, just kind of going through these games, I liked what I saw from Charlotte. I thought that that was a surprising game for me. I thought Atlanta would get a little bit more. But we saw some of the Charlotte defense that we saw last year and what we wanted to lean into them. I don't know if this next round is going to be fantasy relevant for them with Miami, but looking at the next four weeks ahead for Charlotte, I think that's one I definitely want to be keeping my eye on as far as my fantasy plans are going to be. There are a lot of sub 9 million midfielders is what I'm taking away from here that are doing okay with their scores.
Mm-hmm.
And by okay, I mean they'll probably rise some. It's going to help with your budget planning right now. You'll get some gains out of it. So there's just a lot of value right there. And with forwards, I said this in chat during their Discord when I was watching the game. It's almost ridiculous to think you're not going to have Baribo this round. I mean, the man is going to increase pretty much the maximum value you can. I don't know how well he will do, but regardless of that, he is likely going to see a 500,000 increase in his value because of the 5 goals that he's already scored over these last 2 rounds. So if you're looking for value, yeah, I mean, he doesn't even have to play.
If you don't want him,
well, he has to play. But I mean, just if he's going to be playing, which he should be, get him on your team. He's going to increase in value and maybe even get you some better points from there. Just looking through the rest of the games that I just wanted to mention. Let me see. I clicked off that screen real quick. The CCC legs are definitely still showing with these teams. I think some of that was for Cincinnati. Some of that was definitely there for Seattle. So, I mean, definitely pay attention to that section when we get there talking about the impacts of CCC.
Too, I feel like.
Yeah, LAFC's been super disappointing in the league because of what they've been doing there. And it's just hitting so many people. I'm still keeping an eye on New England. Like I said, at the first round, I was impressed they didn't get blown out. I wanted to see what they did in this round, and they only gave up 1 to Columbus, who lost some of its attacking spark. So if Columbus had really blown them out, I've been like, oh, okay, yeah, New England's not getting it together. So I'm still unsure of how to take New England. So I'm still kind of cautious about what I might do for New England based on who their lineups are. On the other side, though, feeling better about the initial takes on Nashville, just not really seeing them as a team that I want to go to a lot for fantasy, potentially even looking at betting against at least one offensive player against Nashville. Same thing with Toronto. I'm going to be at the Cincinnati-Toronto game this coming weekend, so that's going to be awesome. I'm very much so hoping to see a win right there based on the last couple of rounds. Orlando had another fantastic blowout against them, which is what we expect. The Chicago-DC game, 2 bad teams playing each other fantasy-wise, what we expected here. Goals on both sides, Benteke involved. Chicago is missing some of their DPs, and so keep an eye on that. But these are both teams that you're likely going to see goals scored against, and just follow with that. You mentioned San Jose, Matt, and I am keeping an eye on San Jose. I'm optimistic. I do not view them as I did last year, but their first few opponents have had question marks around them. A tired RSL coming back from travel. A bad Sporting Kansas City coming back from some CCC games. San Jose did put up 2 right there. So I am optimistic to some of the options with San Jose, potentially as switcheroo players. I want to see them against some bit more stout opponents to see really how they're going to be going forward. I am definitely stoked about Colorado, though. I mean, you guys have had a lot of goals come through there. You're both ways. So, but I know we mentioned that people talked about Jordy earlier in the year, people were kind of questioning, but I think there's some fantasy options there, Matt.
Yeah, no. You probably stay away from the defense overall, just
Yep.
because I'm not sure that there's not gonna be a lot of clean sheets. There's not gonna be a lot of assists with Moist Bombito gone. I do think Cheeto Awaziem is a fantastic acquisition. Reed, I'm sure you could speak to him with Cincinnati, but this is still a team that's going to score a lot and get scored on a lot. And Georgi Mihailovic and Cole Bassett after week 2 are both still sub 8 million. I'm not super optimistic about them for Austin, but they've got some favorable games coming up later this month as well. They'll be ones to look at within your budget well, and that's a big improvement over where we were, 18 months, 2 years ago. Certainly 2023 was not a banner year. It was a banner year for the Rapids in MLS Fantasy in that I was starting multiple players every single week who were playing against the Colorado Rapids.
So yeah, those are some of my quick takeaways. Just lots of stuff kind of ended up like we touched on. We'll touch on some of the specific players in our next segment where we talk about who we are targeting coming up right after this. All right, let's see here. Gene, you mentioned vice captains. We broke that. That is why this cannot be in the game. I know we've talked about this, and I wanted to talk about it in the segment that we've cut out. Like with the Aru system that we have,
I loved it.
You cannot have. I mean, the only way they can have captains. Like, I'm not gonna say you cannot have captains. The game would have to be totally fine with a Caparoo if that came back, where you could preview your vice captain's points. Like you could put your vice captain on you couldn't do it on the bench. Sorry. You could put your vice captain on the field, see what his points were. If you like them, you just turn your captain into a scrub 4.0 player to guarantee that you get the double points from your vice captain. Completely broke the game and was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It was I don't know if that was the first or second year when the Fantasy Boss community really started. I think it was still over at Reddit at that point. Really started like pioneering that tactic, but it caught MLS completely off guard. Like they were not ready for the Caparoo. They were not ready for the switcheroo. The keeperoo, none of that. The only thing they were ready for, I guess technically probably the keeperoo they were ready for, but like the auto-roo was the only thing that they expected. And from their point of view, it was really just, oh yeah, if that guy doesn't play, it'll sub it. Like it was just this little benign feature of the game so that people weren't like pissed that they didn't get any kind of points at all. And our community completely broke it and have made it part of the game. And it is the one thing that like this community really has ownership of. I mean, it was Brian Cullimore who even started the whole thing. Like I remember it all happening in the chats and stuff. Like, so it is our thing. And if they ever bring vice captain back, they will have to do something or just live with the fact that there will be Caparoos and we will abuse it. We will abuse
Reed,
it.
I want any rule that maximizes the chance of me in like everybody's playing a double game week. I want 200 points. I want to Caparoo Lionel Messi for what Rapids player do I want unused substitute on the bench here? Who do I want to name drop?
Yeah.
Yes, I want that.
Do all that. I mean, it was bananas. BANANAS. It was completely like that. So. Good times though. And you probably know that, Gene, and I may have just had all that spiel for everybody else who doesn't know that history, but it was amazing. Sorry, I had that little quick aside right there, and I am getting out the social for the second part of the show. Where did the Blue Sky one go? I accidentally logged out of Blue Sky. And this is, it's called a skeet. I think that's what they call it. I don't know.
No.
I don't know what they call
use
it.
that term.
This is still the part of the show I cut out, so it's all good. All right, here we go.
I don't care if that is the term. We're not using that here.
That's fine. Shrink. Where's the chat? There's the chat. Okay, news to me. Well, now I know, Gene. That's the history of the Caparoo. Hello and welcome back to our second part of the show where we're talking about players to target. First, a quick little bit of housekeeping. Games start on Saturday, March 8th at 2:15 p.m. with Columbus versus Houston. The usual Apple TV streaming times are right here. Easiest game, the 2:15, the 4 o'clock-ish game to set up with your Aroos. Not many 10:30 games this round, so really keep an eye on those like 7:30 games. It's going to give you the best ability to make the Aroos with a couple of 10:30s. But we've got 2 games playing on Sunday as well. Very easy to get all of your Aroos activated. Miami versus Charlotte and LA Galaxy versus St. Louis. Interesting one right there, to say the least. But a lot of options. Nobody's on a double game week. Nobody's on a bye. We do have, once again, teams competing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Not as many, but we still have a few. We've got Cincinnati, LAFC, and Miami all playing at home, so they're staying domestic. We also have Columbus, who is playing away, but domestic. So it's just U.S. travel right there, so not as much to factor into. However, teams that are playing out of the country, so they may be they're on the road, they're away. LA Galaxy, Seattle, Vancouver. All those teams are on the road, outside of the country. That could be some significant impacts. We saw what happened with San Jose and RSL when they were coming back from, what was it, Costa Rica? Is that what it was? Early in round 1. And so just keep an eye on those teams going into the round. The CCC legs are real. Pay attention to that. You'll definitely see more about it on the Discord going forward. We've seen some cards. We've seen some injuries throughout these games already. In order to stay up to date on which players are impacted by that, head over to the MLS Fantasy Boss Discord community, go down to the Fantasy Tools, and check out the 2025 Mega Reference. Great community curated project led by Ranchinator and other players to just help keep up to date on who's in, who's out, who's available, who's on set pieces, who is a safe scrub. So check that out to get the latest up to date. Safe scrub. There we go. Everything's right there. All right. Housekeeping's out of the way. Let's talk about target players going into round 3. Matt, who are you looking at? Starting as always, keepers and defenders.
Keepers. I've really liked the earlier games that we've had on, just to have a little bit of space as well. And Columbus Crew taking on Houston Dynamo, who've lost 2 home games as well. Crew are looking good, so give me Patrick Schulte in goal. And then I might have a keeper set up for that, given how early it is. So I'll have him on the bench. TBD on who I'll have later on. I'm dealing with still a little bit of budget issues because I'm going a little heavy on the forwards this week. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm looking at Tanoka from Vancouver as a possible outlet, but we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I feel good about the Crew this week. I'll probably have at least 2 players in my lineup for them, given they're playing Houston.
And what about defense?
Defense. So I know you mentioned clean sheets are a bonus right now, Reid, but I'm looking at San Jose and Dallas certainly. The 2 games that I'm really liking are Columbus versus Houston, and then Chicago Fire. It's been a goal scoring, but also a goal conceding start to the Greg Berhalter era. And I saw Dallas firsthand, and it took Ashley. You mentioned that Evander finally scored, and I was a little bit skeptical. I stayed away from Dallas and Cincinnati in the first 2 weeks because I was kind of concerned, the guys hadn't joined their team, how much training had they actually done, and surprised it took 2 weeks for 2 of the top 10 players in MLS to get completely familiar with their teams. So I like Dallas and I like San Jose. I will be having Kai Wagner, even though they are on the road to New England. And Reid, I think we might have a Rodney Wallace phenomenon situation because Akil Watts has been playing in the midfield for St. Louis, even though he's listed in the game as a defender, and he's been a bit of a live wire up front. He's been getting attacks started. St. Louis hasn't scored a goal yet, so maybe we don't have the Rodney Wallace to Fernando Adis phenomenon quite yet, but they've also gotten 2 clean sheets. I don't know that that'll be continued, but we're all kind of down on the LA Galaxy from a fantasy standpoint, and I do think St. Louis could get a clean sheet, or at the very least, he'll be getting some attacking bonuses given the midfield situation for the LA Galaxy. So that's what I'm looking at defender-wise.
Like it so much. Ashley, who are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm considering Fryer Schulte to Ostari. I think that just makes sense timing wise. I will say, because I'm off Seattle at the moment because I tried to start the season on friendly terms with my own team and it really bit me in the ass. So the Sounders have never shut out LAFC at home. We've shut them out on the road, but they've never shut out. And someone will look this up and tell me I'm wrong, but it's so common that I believe that LAFC have never not scored. This is a Denis Bouanga playground. He loves to score against Seattle in Seattle. So the Fry aspect of that makes me a little concerned, but the timing is appealing. And just like Seattle, LAFC are in CCC. They've looked a little flat. So who's flatter in this situation, I guess, is what we're gonna wonder. But still considering Fry, he's cheaper than Schulte, but that's because Seattle hasn't kept a clean sheet. So something to look at there. I am still all in on price rises. That's where I'm hedging my bets in defense. Clean sheets have been a little hard to come by. I like Kai Wagner. I think that's a great shout. I think to do it, even with the money I have, I'd have to have a scrub, and I don't know that I want to still. So I'm still looking at your Ricketts for San Jose. I think a decent shutout at home against Minnesota possibility maybe. Valencia for New York is on a price rise. They're going to Atlanta. I think is it Smith for Portland? I might have his name wrong. I'm definitely still considering Teenage with even with the CCC. Smith for Portland. Apologies. I like Cincinnati's shutout possibility, but a lot depends on what happens in CCC, how much are they rotating, those types of things. And then I called him out last week and I didn't play him and I'm pissed off about it, but Duggan from Minnesota, I think should still see a price rise. And I don't like betting on both sides of a game, but like I said, I'm really looking at players that I think or know will price rise in my defense and then putting all of my money into my midfield and strikers. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, so I have a quick question about Fry because we just had this segment where we talked about CCL legs. Is going with Fry more appealing because both teams are going to have CCL legs?
I don't think it's more appealing than Schulte. I think if you can find the budget for what is he 6'7", I think Schulte is a better go. They're fresh into CCC. They are away, but domestically away.
Right.
So it's less travel. LAFC are home, which you'd think would benefit them, and Seattle travel away internationally, which should be a disadvantage to them. Now, Fry and Thomas have been rotating as far as CCC and MLS minutes. So there's a chance Stefan Fry doesn't even play midweek. But it still should take some out of the Sounders. Reagan has a mystery injury right now, so he is not starting, and they're resting him to maintain. He's not out, but he wasn't starting against RSL. Alex Roldan didn't travel to RSL, so the Seattle defense is also taking a change in formation depending on if Paul Arriola starts. So these are all factors that make me nervous for Fry. But again, two teams that play CCC. He's still only 6, so that's cheapish, and it would be your bench play, right? Because it's an earlier game. So, like I said, I'm leaning Schulte, but I think there are appealing factors to Steph Fry.
I gotta also take a quick aside. Looking at Tate over here in chat, shots fired at Seattle right there. Sounders are on pace for 34 own goals this year. That's some rough.
Technically, that's correct.
It is, and that is the best kind of correct. So, I don't have a lot to add because I think you guys really touch the easiest keeperoo is going to be going with a Columbus player. I don't like a lot of the matches with what's lined up. We have away teams who have been on great form. We talked about last show how some of the away teams have really been worth betting on, a bit more so than we've considered oftentimes in the previous year. And you still have Ustari, who is playing for Miami 4.0. You're not going to lose points. He very easily activates your keeperoo. And the other advantage is if you have to start him. But since he's very likely going to play, you can't leave him on your bench if you want to get those points. Like I had Coronel last week and I wanted those points. LA Galaxy's got a 4.0 keeper who does not play. So it's an easy switch out with the Sunday game to get that scrub, and it's going to be good. Other keepers I'll at least mention so that we have them part of the discussion going on there. As Ashley was saying, focused on potential price rises based on their previous games. So almost regardless of how they might do. Lloris has gone up 900,000 over the past couple of rounds, even on the road. This could be a 0-0 draw. And so you could have either way with Fry or with Lloris. Lloris is more expensive, but I would expect to see him have a price rise. CJ Dos Santos over with San Diego is 7 million. He's gone up a cool million over this whole round. And so this is a game on the road to RSL. I don't know what their clean sheet chances really are, but he is likely going to rise again and again. You could have him on your bench, see how he does. You're going to get the price rise regardless. If he doesn't do well, Ustari right in there. Easy way to go in there, and just you won't lose that many points with a keeper because of the way they work. You could also.
Just one thought going back to the not taking stuff that's happened in 2 games as outliers of like indication. Yes, Seattle Sounders are on pace for 30+ own goals. I just did some math. Ty Baribo thus is on pace for 57 goals. And if he gets that read, I think would that not be the greatest MLS fantasy player of all time?
That would very easily.
Reid, I will personally carve you a bronze statue, life scale of Ty Baribo for you to put in the office for MLS fantasy.
That would be
if Ty Baribo gets 57 goals this year in MLS play,
and 3 of them being against me. I don't know if I'd like that. That is a nice takeaway about not taking these things too much as outliers. We're focused so much on it right now with the value gain because we're looking at the 3 and 5 week average with players. When you're significantly outperforming your player's cost in points scored for these first 3 rounds, you're going to be seeing these increases almost regardless of what their third score is. Once we hit round 4, you'll hear our conversation start to shift about, well, when those big points start to fall off, what's going to happen. But these are definitely outliers for the whole season wise, but we're just focused on these first 3 rounds for point value. So that's why we're hitting it so hard. Berkey, another one, up 850,000, could very well see an increase this round against LA, may even get that clean sheet. We'll see how that works. Colleen is in the conversation. I would be hesitant for him because of that game against Miami. But then again, we've got after that, people like St. Clair, Daniel, Willis look tempting. Don't know about their games. Willis is probably a decent shot at that. St. Clair, I'd be a little bit hesitant to. Daniel also probably a good shot. And he's pretty cheap as well. So this is just looking at, again, their total increase over the past couple of rounds. Getting clean sheets is going to help. But again, you could easily just throw in someone like Schulte's probably got the best chance of all these players. But I do want to throw those players out because I can see if you're just price hunting, that this could easily be someone that you're throwing in if you feel better. And when we start to see some of the stats with the chances of XGs and stuff coming out later in the week, these could be guys to at least just jot down, keep an eye on. Defense, I 100% agree with everything I'm seeing in chat, everything you guys are saying right now. It is still for me all about value building. Like I said before, I'm still targeting the cheap players. If you have a system that works out where you could get someone like Wagner on your team, go for it. I mean, I think he is locked in for a price increase. I think he's going to have potentially a great game again with the way Philly's playing, even on the road. For me, it's still focused on the budget players, and you can find some other cheap players. Like if you want a San Jose player, I mean, you could look at Romney. He's a little bit cheaper, 7.0 million. He's gone up 750,000. Likely going to see that price increase again with him. So there are some budget options to be had there. Even as Ashley said, you got to play both sides of the match because you're just looking for the rises. That's what's going to give you that flexibility to have a round where you go, yeah, just give me all 3 of these guys. I'm good. Let's fill it up and then start going from there. So it's going to be okay. So nothing else to add right there. Let's move on to talking about midfielders. Ashley.
Yeah, this one was hard. This is one of those weeks I'd like 8 midfielders probably, and no budget for them, which is just cheating. I like Ryan Gauld. I'd like to see. They're still in? Yes, right? Yeah. Oh, so last time they rested him for CCC, and he played on the weekend, but his weekend performance sucked. This is technically a derby. They're playing Montreal at home, but they're traveling internationally more than just to America. So I'm interested to see what their CCC looks like because I want to give him another go, even though he let me down with the 3. I'm also similar setup with Evander and Rusnak. Those are 3 players that I'm just watching what CCC looks like for them. Do I want them in their home games with decent matchups? Rusnak has been rotated for Seattle. That's probably the one I'm on the least. But Gald and Evander are definitely 2 I'm paying attention to. Espinoza is a player that I like. Heron Lopez got a red card against SKC. That was a double yellow. It doesn't look like it'll be overturned in any way. So I am wondering if Espinoza will move. He doesn't. He always plays on the wing, but I'm wondering if someone else will play in the 10. Does that affect Espinoza's points? We'll see. But I do like his matchup, and they performed really well at home in the first round. So I'm hoping that he could duplicate that again. I like Gazdag, I like Ojeda, and I like Lucho. Those are definitely 3 that kind of went in together for me. Ojeda had a really great round 1 and a disappointing round 2, but Gazdag, kind of like you were saying, Reid, looks just set to rise even with the matchup. Lucho seems to be starting to click. It's really weird to pick him in a Western Conference team. But he and Musa, who we'll get to in a minute, seem to be really kind of clicking, not in necessarily like goals and assists, but it just in how their style of play is looking. So definitely looking at those 3. And then if he's playing, Segovia for Miami will price rise. I think he's 6.7.
Yeah.
So again, I know this sounds like really boring, like, well, but who should I play? And we're just here talking about people that are just going to gain money, but that's how you get to pick whoever you want, right? Is by having money. And also, I feel like it was Eli who said this last year. I could be wrong. If you just pick players that score well, you will also gain money, right? And so I don't want to get too in my head here, but having to wait for the Miami game to see, I don't think I'll actually take him. But if you're in like a budget situation and you can wait to see, and just throw a Miami midfielder on your bench spot there. If he is playing, that's an easy 5 million for sure. But he's got to play. So we'll see if he did. It seemed like he was more the Messi replacement. And again, like I said, Miami having these 2 Sunday games is a pain in the ass because you got to wait or save space for them. So like I said, I don't think I'll do it. I don't have the courage. I'd rather, like I said, pick a bunch of midfielders, but that was just something I wanted to point out just in case, that was the route someone wanted to go.
Matt.
I agree with everything Ashley said about those 3 names at the top. I'll have Lucho. He's certainly in contention for me to captain him. What a turnaround I've had, Reid, in terms of Lucho being my Michael Barrios, where you were on it holding the high line. I reconsidered him certainly, and I put him in my team last week, and he scored against the Rapids, which was bad for the Rapids, good for my fantasy team name, Atencio Deficit Disorder. So Lucho, Ojeda, and Gazdag, I'll be picking 2 of those 3 certainly. Probably don't have the budget for all 3, given what I want to do with the forward position. So I'll just look at some other differentials that maybe Ashley didn't look at. Espinoza versus Almiron, 2 home games, I think relatively favorable matchups. I do think their teams are better this year, certainly. Almiron didn't play well against Charlotte. He didn't do a whole lot in fantasy with Charlotte as well. Reid, I think your questions about how much of what San Jose's done, it was just winning 2 games against questionable teams with relatively even XG. We've seen Espinoza at time be the only good thing that San Jose had going from a fantasy standpoint. And I would love to be able to talk to a person who won a league full of Atlanta fans after the 2018 season saying that Joseph Martinez is $7.5 million to start the year with San Jose in 2025. So Espinoza versus Almiron, TBD on both of those. And then my 2 that I'm looking at from a CCC standpoint, I thought Segovia was fantastic in his first 2 games with Inter Miami. And in particular, he's not just a passenger who's around really, really good players. If you haven't seen the goal that he scored against Houston, that was absolutely fantastic. But it's not like Suarez and Busquets and Alba are doing all the work and he's just the guy getting the tap in at the end of it. So I do like him, especially at 6.7 million. My equivalent for that for Columbus, since I like Columbus's matchup this week, is Chambas. I'll probably pick one of them. I will probably decide based on what happens for those 2 teams in Conca Champions.
You guys have covered a lot of the big names right here. I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, even if you're going budget defense, depending on your forward strategy, it's really going to dictate where you're going to be dropping some of that money. I mean, if you could afford someone like Gazdag, Espinoza, Gold, Lucho, Evander, I mean, those are a lot of the big names that we've thrown out there. I think you're going to have to find some budget people that are playing, though. In chat, we've had Maxi Morales' name thrown out as the home opener for New York. A bit more of a risk on a value, bit more of a risk on the value. He's not had a lot of the production so far at the opening season. He has gone up 350,000, but it's really going to depend on what this score is for if you potentially lose some money there. Someone also a bit more risky, but cheap. Stroud, I know that we were talking about that.
But cheap.
550 for a guy who's been playing 70 some minutes the last couple of rounds. This is all about maybe getting a little bit of money out of it. Someone who's playing, you never know there. Matt, I got to ask you, tell me about Oliver Larraz.
Oh, he was my favorite cheap player last year.
That's right, 7.1. He's gone up 600,000 so far this year with playing 90 minutes in the first and getting 2 assists against Dallas with 73 minutes. Is this, at the beginning of the season, a potential low-cost rapid that could help us with our budgets?
I think so, Reid. Ollie Larraz had a really fantastic coming out party last year. That was also coincided with the injury to Connor Ronan, and Chris Armas had to do some strange tactics on the fly. It was good for Ollie in that he finally got on the field as the next Rapids homegrown to get an opportunity, but it wasn't super great from a fantasy standpoint. The Rapids didn't really properly have a proper D-mid, so it was basically Ollie was the guy who knew Cole Bassett from their time in the academy, so they played well together, but that was mostly Ollie sitting back and doing Regis's stuff while Cole Bassett went forward and do attacking stuff. And so the only real bonuses that you would get from Ollie is that he would play most games. He would usually play at least 60 minutes, and whatever passing stat bonus was there, he was doing that. What's interesting in what the Rapids have done this year, and Ashley, you'll appreciate this, is that Josh Atencio's come in, and functionally the Rapids now, instead of having a double pivot, have now had a triple pivot. And so Cole Bassett is doing so much stuff in the early buildup that it's actually been Ollie Larraz delivering the pass before the pass to unleash things alongside with Georgi Mihailovic. I don't know that Ollie's going to have like so many consistent, well-performing games that he increases so much in value. You know, I mean, I don't think his peak's getting to 9 million at any point this year. If he has a huge breakout season, maybe I'll be wrong on that. But so I do think he's going to start most games. He's going to play at least 60 minutes in most of those games, and he's going to be regularly involved in the Rapids attack. And we saw last year, even players that we didn't think about significantly from a fantasy standpoint get good conversion rates when they were in good form. So I look at a Calvin Harris at a forward position. Cole Bassett was an excellent example of that. He was never over 10 million last year. Georgie's the one who will get all the headlines and all the thought from a macro view from a fantasy standpoint. But I do think Ollie's going to be good value in ways that like 2016 Michael Azira was, or maybe not 2021 Jack Price, just because he got so many assists from those corners. There have been times this year in which Ollie has taken corners on one side instead of Georgie, but I think certainly right now, I don't like him this week because they're playing at Austin, but certainly the next Rapids home game, and I would be willing to bet Ollie Larraz is your best, is a top 10 midfielder under 8.5 million at the end of the season.
There we go. I love it. So definitely get slotted in there. A few of the guys I want to mention, I see Mukhtar's name coming up a lot in chat. I question the offensive consistency that you're going to see from him. Teeth, I like Teeth, but I'm looking at it this way. It is Nashville at home, Portland coming in. Mukhtar is 8.5. Costa is 8.5. I think I'm leaning. I think I'm leaning. Yeah, I mean they're both 8.5. I'm not sure what I've seen from Mukhtar is justifying that. The consistency of what I've seen. We had that set play from last week with the Costa that I think shows a lot more promise with what's shown in the points and the price changes right now. So I'd lean more towards that than Mukhtar if you're looking at someone in that 8.5 range. I mean, that's cheaper than Gazdag, cheaper than Acosta, a little bit more than Espinoza. So you could definitely afford him with one or two of those other guys right there. I'm also going to throw out Almiron. I mean, he did not have, he's 8.8. He's at home to Red Bull, so maybe a little bit of a tougher match, but he didn't get an assist or a goal last round, but the guy had 7 key passes. coming off of 4 key passes before there. He's creating chances, and if that's going to connect against Red Bulls, it could result in points. Again, though, this is one where, since he's not had some of that consistent performance, I'm a bit more hesitant about the potential price rise. The risk of losing points on this is there, but as Eli said, if you get a guy who's going to get points, you're going to get value off of that as well. I could see how you might look at that matchup and say, I think there's something there. I think that this player could produce for me in this round. So those are a few other guys I'll throw out there. Keep an eye out in the Discord. Keep an eye out for people identifying some of these lower cost players. I mean, there are a few guys out there who you could definitely slot in. But as I said, we're going to go into forwards right now because depending on what you're doing at this front line is really going to transition into how much you can spend at this midfield. If you can roll with 4 players who are over 8 million, or if you've got to find some place to start cutting. So let's just go right there. And Matt, who are you looking at for forwards?
Peter Musa is my one lock for this week. I love stacking him and Lucho, given they're playing Chicago Fire. And again, this will be pending Conca Champions, but it'll be one of Messi or Diego Rossi for me. I want to lean Messi right now because they're at home and they certainly have the lesser opponent. I have to imagine Will Fernandes is going to try and get a result against LAFC, and they're playing. It's their game's at BMO, correct? Do I have that right in the schedule? Yeah, and so you compare that to Miami at home to a Jamaican team that I imagine, if they're up a couple goals, certainly there's going to be a quick hook on Messi, and then obviously they've got an extra day of rest and they're playing at home this week. But so it'll be one of those two. I'll be TBD depending on what happens after Thursday. And then depending on my budget, I want to see what I do from a midfield standpoint. Could I fit Gazdag, Ojeda, and Lucho and all that? Maybe. If I do, I probably don't have enough money for a proper second, third option at the striker position. So I like what you both have said about Baribu. If I'm looking for just a few more bucks to save, then maybe Joseph Martinez on the bench for San Jose.
Ashley.
Baribo is first in my team for the price rise. Decent matchup, 100% price rise. And then Musa was second, quick second. He low-key has posted 11 points in both games, or both rounds, I should say, and he's just coming up for us round 3. So I think he needs a little, and I do like that home matchup for sure. And then I am, if in a world where Messi isn't playing, it's Benteke for me. It's Benteke at home against SKC. I think he's the second or third highest producing points over the first 2 rounds. But Messi exists, so what do you do? So there's definitely a lot of monitoring the CCC games, trying to, bribe people that I see on Blue Sky from their media outlet. I don't know what to do because, again, I hope nobody's playing a drinking game to how many times I reference this, but they're on the Sunday game again, and I don't want to have to wait until the Sunday game, to see who is starting for them, because then, you might be kind of stuck. Now, they're the first Sunday game this week at least, so you could pivot to someone from the Galaxy or St. Louis, but I hate, kind of having my back against the wall like that. You could also most likely go Suarez or even Zaha. So there's definitely options in these Sunday selections, but it's hard for me to say no to Benteke or Musa, because in my mind there's only 2 options because of Baribo. But it's hard to pass on one of those players with a hope of Messi, especially when he didn't play last week. So I'm not quite sure. And in case no one's noticed, he's expensive. So I'm not quite sure what I want to do, but either I'm gonna mess with the budget, mess with the mid, lower someone in my midfield, maybe not have Kai Wagner and have Messi, or I might run the gambit and hope he doesn't play and I don't get left out.
So for me, it's Messi and Baribo are in the team. I mean, Messi, I'm expecting to come in fully rested for this game against Charlotte. Baribo for the form. I mean, I could definitely see opportunities for more goals and the guaranteed price rise. It's the third one for me. I'm 0.1 away from being able to do Messi, Baribo, Musa. I am 0.1 into good to be able to do Benteke in that spot. So right now I have Benteke. It's sort of between those four guys, I think, is who you're talking about right there. I could easily probably make a switch to my defense to get a little bit of extra money to make that happen. And it comes down to, for me, Musa's had a goal and assist in each of his first 2 rounds, as Matt was mentioning. Not a lot of shots. Benteke has had a goal in each round and had 12 shots last week. And he's playing at home against Sporting Kansas City. Now, with San Jose, Sporting Kansas City had more shots. San Jose had more shots on goal. And so I think there will be chances for Benteke to get those shots. But Dallas is going up against Chicago. And so I think those are 2 good games. I definitely want to see more. This is something I'm going to have to think about over there. But those 4 guys, I think, are going to be some of the clear go-tos for this round. I'm seeing the same things in there. I mean, if we don't see Messi, I would easily go to Suarez with that matchup and with how he's performed recently. I do think it's Messi. Everything that I heard last week was just he is being rested for this home game. We've been playing some in CCC. We want to make sure we're doing well in front of the home crowd. We're not going to go to Houston. We don't have to go to Houston. So clearly they didn't have to. And so it's I'm expecting great things from him. So I mean, I'm not even seeing a lot of other options coming through in the chat. I mean, this is definitely the chalk team you're looking at for the forward. But if you do this is where so much of your money has gone to, and it's going to mean you have to find budget defense. You're going to have to make some concessions in your midfield. But when you do those choices, look at the value increases so you can still try to be trending in that right direction when you do have those guys who come in. So I'm off Peck. I'm off Benteke. I'm off Bawanga. Like, this is just not happening for Galaxy. There's too much with the CCC legs that are right there.
Bawanga will score this weekend, but yeah, I don't think you need to pick him up.
I mean, I'm not going with that. And so that's I mean, some people talking about Dinke. I mean, I am not against Dinke at all. It's just I'm looking at the value increases I think are more sure about the 4 players that we've talked about. So hope great things happen in this Toronto game. I want to go and see so many of these scores. There have been some rotate. Cincinnati is clearly prioritizing CCC with this and how they're playing. And so I think those guys Evander, Dinke are going to be playing. They'll get some time. It's still helping with the meshing of just the tactics and the conditioning and everything. But it's these guys that I know I'm much more confident going to have the value rise. All right, let's wrap everything up with our captains. So I've seen a few people in chat who are already saying that they're seriously not considering Messi. I don't know how serious they mean that. But Ashley, we'll start with you. Who are you looking at for captains? And if it's not Messi, who?
If it's not Messi, it's Lucho.
Okay.
And I feel safe with him.
Okay.
I mean, it's tough this early in the season. I think he's fitting. I like the matchup. I am worried about the Sundayness of it all. So I think it should be Messi. I want to, admittedly, I didn't do a ton of that going into this, but I want to do some reading. I want to see on my computer that it says he was rested before I decide to throw the armband on him. With that matchup, Charlotte has a good defense. I think that's something that we're kind of overlooking. They traveled well and they played at home rock solid last season, and they look to do the same now. But as I've said on here too many times as well, Messi's still Messi. So if I feel like he's going to play, I'm going to armband him. And then I think that it would be worth doing what you're saying, where, you know, if he doesn't play and you're stuck with a captain, just throw it on Suarez. You know, Suarez is an okay alternative. He definitely produced this last round at Houston without him, with a hat trick of assists and a goal. So wouldn't have been too bad of a captain this last round. So if it's not Messi, Lucho, but I think there's definitely a case to be made with going with Messi, seeing what happens and adjusting from there.
Matt.
It'll be one of the two Dallas guys, either Peter Musa or Lucho Acosta. I do want to wait to see when the lineups drop. What is Chicago Fire doing, given Gutierrez, I believe, is still suspended? What does that mean for the midfield shape or what they're doing tactically? If they try to clog it up the middle or just have Kellen Acosta go after Lucho, which is something he did with Colorado Rapids and LAFC to great effect, then I'll probably lean. I'm probably leaning 60-40 Peter Musa, Reid. But like you said, I think before we hit the record button, we tend to overthink it as MLS fantasy people. I might just go with my gut, or ask the good friends over in the Discord to vote for me. But it'll be one of the two Dallas players for sure.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, as I said a few podcasts ago, when you get Messi, when you take Messi, you're not expecting him to have an okay game. You're expecting him to get a couple of goals, a goal and 2 assists. I mean, you're expecting a big point haul, and that's what you want to captain. And so that is the reason you give him the captain. If he's not there, you'll have to check out this week's Captain Short video over at YouTube to see who we finally rest on the recommendations for that. So, but thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you so much, Matt, for being here, and everyone for joining us live for the stream. Let's end as we do every week with our plugs. Matt.
Check out my written work on the Colorado Rapids at burgundywave.com, and check out my podcast, Holding the High Line, with Rabbi and Red, wherever you get your podcast. So we are not on YouTube, I will say that much. And follow me more so on Blue Sky, so by Matt Pollard over there, and still on the Bird app, still occasionally posting on the Bird app at LWS Matt Pollard. Thank you.
Ashley.
Yep, just plug in that Discord community. There's so much going on with MLS Fantasy Boss articles, content that we're trying to put out this season in not in place of, but trying to fill in that gap that MLS has opened wide up. So please continue to check out that. People behind the scenes are working really hard. And so we're hoping it's helping some of you out.
Yeah, head over to MLSFantasyBoss.com. We've got all kinds of great articles. We're having the strategy clinic, the fantasy strategy clinic article coming out this week, talking about the value gains. We'll, of course, have matchups to target, player position rankings from Christian, Tyler's differentials from Team Ranchinator, all sorts of good stuff, loads of things. If you see something that you are interested in, let us know, because we're also having tips from insiders as well for the insider advice articles that we have, which is sort of things that we want to talk about as we're going through there. So just let us know what you want to see. Love interacting with the community. And if you haven't been, yes, the Discord link is there as well. It's a fantastic community. Some people are on Reddit. We're not there as much anymore, but if you're there, let me know. I'll throw you some bones, but Discord is where it's at. But I hope you guys enjoy the show tonight. Thank you so much. And as always, good luck.